Have you ever noticed how some people naturally hold power over others without ever speaking a word? They don't have to chase after attention or explain themselves to anyone. Instead, they simply pull back and disappear from the usual patterns of contact. Then, suddenly, everyone seems to scramble trying to get close to them again. It might seem like magic or some mysterious force, but it's actually the subtle power of pulling back. Most people never learn how to use this simple but effective tool to their advantage. This is not about playing manipulative games or being cold. It's about understanding a fundamental principle rooted in human psychology. We tend to value most what becomes less available to us. When you are always present, always quick to respond, always ready to help, and endlessly giving your energy and time, people start to take your presence for granted. Your availability becomes expected rather than truly appreciated. However, something powerful and transformative happens when you step back and stop being so available. The entire dynamic shifts. People who barely noticed you when you were constantly around suddenly become aware of your absence. Those who took advantage of your willingness to always be there start to question whether they might have pushed too far. The free energy and attention you once gave so easily now turns into something they have to earn. This is where genuine change begins. Think about the moment just before you send a message or respond to someone. That little pause, that breath you take instead of firing off an immediate reply, holds more power than you might realize. It's in that silence where you choose not to react that the energy in the situation begins to shift. So what if silence itself was your secret strategy? Society often teaches us that strength means always being assertive and reactive. But truthfully, silence can rearrange the entire room. It unsettles the usual balance of interactions. When you stop feeding the cycle with your energy, that cycle slowly begins to starve. For example, imagine a simple group chat where you usually reply instantly, always available, always explaining yourself. Then, one day, you don't. You leave a message unread. You choose not to justify or explain. Suddenly, others notice. They ask, "Everything okay?" The silence becomes a signal. They sense your energy has been pulled back. Your presence, once taken for granted, feels suddenly gone. And just like that, the power between you shifts without a single word being exchanged. You don't need to argue to prove a point. You don't need to justify your feelings or validate yourself through explanations. Sometimes the most commanding, most influential action you can take is simply nothing at all. There is an ongoing, quiet transaction in every relationship you have ever had. Most likely, you never even realized you were engaged in it. It isn't only about connection. It's about access, emotional access. It's about the version of you that people rely on to comfort them, to react predictably, and to absorb their emotions. You might see yourself as just being yourself, the fixer, the soother, the one who explodes in frustration, but then quickly apologizes to keep the peace. But ask yourself, are you truly being yourself? Or are you performing a version of yourself that keeps everything stable, maybe even suppressing parts of your true feelings? The truth is, they aren't really connecting with the real you. They are connecting with the emotional patterns and predictable responses you have trained into the relationship. They know exactly when you'll flinch, cave, or crack a joke to avoid difficult truths. That is not intimacy, that is programming. The more predictable and reliable your reactions become, the more control you unknowingly hand over to others. When emotional availability is left unchecked, it can become a form of leverage. It might not be intentional, but it is always there in effect. The moment someone learns exactly which button to press to get a response from you, that is not connection, that is control. Now imagine this. They try to bait you like they always do, but this time you simply don't respond. No defense, no frustration, just silence. Watch what happens then. They stumble. Their usual script falls apart because you've broken the loop. In that brief pause, the moment you break the cycle, you reclaim your power, because what they really relied on wasn't your love or affection, it was your reaction. That was the emotional currency they learned to spend. And the second you stop reacting, everything shifts. Your identity changes, and your sense of value begins to rise, not in their eyes, but in yours. They don't fear your anger as much as they fear your neutrality. They don't fear your words as much as they fear your quiet, calm absence. They fear the silence where their power once lived. That quiet space, the absence of your usual reaction, is where their control fades away. And when you finally stop playing the part they cast you in, when you refuse to perform the emotional roles they expect, suddenly they don't know who they're dealing with anymore. Good, because that confusion means you are finally meeting the real you, the authentic self that's been hidden beneath the routines and patterns. Let's get honest for a moment. Most people don't truly respect your time, not the sacred, limited, and irreplaceable resource that it is. Instead, they respect your availability, your access, and your usefulness. Your time, the time that once given you can never get back, is rarely honored. Society teaches people to expect your energy like it's some kind of subscription service, always on, auto-renewing every day, every hour, every yes, without anyone stopping to check whether you have anything left to give. But here is a deeper truth. Your time is your soul's currency. Every moment spent on someone else's chaos, rather than your own alignment, drains you. It's a kind of poverty no one sees. You cancel your evening, the one night your nervous system begged for rest, a soak in the bath, a moment with a book, or simply the luxury of nothingness, and instead pick up the phone. Drama again. You nod, you hold space, you shrink, and by the end of it, they feel better. But you're vibrating on a lower frequency. You traded your peace for proximity once again. Your body and mind operate on energy. Every thought, emotion, and boundary you set or fail to set emits a unique vibrational signature. High frequencies include feelings like joy, clarity, and self-respect, while low frequencies carry guilt, resentment, and depletion. This isn't just poetic language, it's a literal energetic truth. Every forced yes lowers your vibration because you're tuning yourself into someone else's chaos. The more you do this, the more your energetic field adjusts, attracting people who expect and feed off that overly available, boundaryless version of you. And they're not even aware of it. They're simply syncing to the frequency you broadcast. But here's the spiritual trap. You begin to believe that being drained equals being loving. You convince yourself that abandoning your needs is kindness. You make martyrdom into a moral high ground. But it's not. Each time you say yes to something your soul didn't consent to, you fracture your internal alignment. And fractured alignment leads to chronic imbalance, emotionally, mentally, even physically. That's when burnout creeps in, that hollow, numb feeling of living a life that doesn't feel like yours at all. And yet, most people won't stop to wonder what it cost you to be there for them. They just assume you had it to give because our culture encourages entitlement to your time, but rarely honors it. So here's a vital reminder. You don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your energy. Your peace doesn't require a permission slip. Your frequency doesn't need to be lowered for others to feel comfortable in their dysfunction. You weren't born to be emotionally on call 24/7s. You were born to tune into the resonance of your own soul. And here's the heaviest truth. Your time here on this earth is limited. You don't extend it by pleasing everyone. Every hour spent in resentment is an hour you will never get back. Life isn't an endless reservoir of maybe next time. It is happening right now, this very minute. So the real question isn't just who are you trying to keep? It's also, what part of yourself are you losing in the process? What if you stopped asking, will they still love me if I say no, and started asking, will I still love myself if I keep saying yes? Because your soul is not here to be exhausted. It's here to expand, and you don't expand by shrinking. You expand by honoring the frequency of your truth, no matter how inconvenient that may be for others. Let them adjust or let them go. You have a life to live, a life that actually feels like yours. Being too available is one of the most subtle forms of self-erasure, because when people love the function you provide more than who you actually are, it creates an illusion of closeness. It feels warm on the surface but hollow at the core. You show up, you support, you soften the chaos. And for a moment, it feels like connection. But beneath that transaction is something quieter, something more disturbing. They're not holding you, they're holding your function. Maybe you've become so good at being helpful that no one has ever really needed to ask, who are you beneath all that help? Perhaps they never noticed. Perhaps you didn't either. This is how it begins. At first it looks like love. It sounds like gratitude. It moves like trust. But it's not love, it's utility. And the longer you play the role of the rescuer, the more people forget you have wounds of your own. Wounds left unspoken because your value quietly got tangled with your silence. Let's be honest. You became indispensable because deep down, you didn't believe you were lovable without being needed. And that's the deeper truth most people avoid confronting, not because they don't feel it, but because naming it means facing how long you've lived in the performance, the role you play. Carl Jung called this a confusion of identity, a collapse of self into the persona, the social mask crafted to navigate societal expectations. This mask wasn't made to manipulate others. It was born from a need to protect yourself when being authentic felt unsafe, when softness was dismissed, and your real voice was too disruptive to be welcome. So you adapted, giving the world what it rewarded, your competence, loyalty, availability. But over time, this mask ceased to be an accessory. It became a prison. You weren't responding anymore. You were rehearsing, not connecting, but maintaining your relevance, your role, your place in the lives of those who only saw you clearly when you filled a need. Now, you don't know where your usefulness ends and your true identity begins. Here's what few admit. When love is mixed with utility, silence feels threatening, stillness suspicious, and resting rebellious. Because if you're not constantly proving your worth through action and service, who are you? This question terrifies you because beneath the doing is a soul afraid of what happens when you finally stop. What if the calls stop? What if they drift away? But here's the paradox. You keep giving to prevent this, and in doing so, guarantee it. The more you train others to value your service over your substance, the more invisible your essence becomes, fracturing your soul. In energy terms, when emotional labor becomes your identity, your energetic field thins. You become more accessible to others, less to yourself, giving your bandwidth in fragments, a reply here, a fix there, a shoulder, a rescue, until your own frequency fades, becoming faint and unstable. It's not that you don't exist, you're just hard to find inside your own life. This is the cost of usefulness as currency. You hand it out until nothing remains for your own needs. Then you look up, surrounded by people but profoundly alone, not because they failed you, but because you taught them to love your mask. You were generous but also afraid to disappoint, to be ordinary, to be forgettable if you stopped being extraordinary in what you gave. But usefulness isn't love. It's the socially accepted form of self-abandonment. Jung said the longer you over-identify with your persona, the louder your shadow grows, the tired, angry, bitter, depleted parts waiting beneath the surface. They don't disappear, They accumulate and eventually surface, not to destroy you but to ask gently, what remains if you stop performing? You are not inexhaustible, and pretending you are is slow soul death. You deserve love in your stillness, your no, your silence, your absence. Those who only come for the version of you that solves problems aren't your people. The ones who stay when you rest, they see you and make love safe again. Here's your invitation. Take off the mask. Withdraw the performance. See who stays and truly cares, not to punish, but to protect what's left, to recover the parts that never needed earning. You aren't here to be a utility or be accessed on demand. You're here to exist fully, imperfectly, unapologetically. Those who can hold that space, they aren't threatened when you stop giving. They're grateful when you start simply being. Real connection begins there. Not in what you do, but who you are. When the performance ends, power doesn't always leave with loud exits. It often seeps quietly through unchecked reactions, petty arguments, unworthy triggers, and emotional overstimulation. You may not notice because it feels righteous, justified, immediate. You find yourself arguing hours on end for points you forgot mattered, sending long messages to unlistening ears, rehearsing confrontations that never happen. By midday, your chest tightens and your mind buzzes with static. Then you wonder, why do I feel so heavy? Why am I so drained? The answer is surprisingly simple. Every overreaction is like a power outage inside your internal system. Long before social media turned every thought into a performance, Carl Jung understood the psyche not as a static filing cabinet of thoughts, but as a living, flowing current, an energetic system constantly managing itself. This system channels attention, focuses emotion, and either leaks or retains power. When you react impulsively, without pause, without reflection, you divert that precious energy away from your higher purpose. Instead of feeding the clear signal of your true self, you empower the noise, the shadow within you. Reactivity feels like motion, but often it's just motion sickness, a dizzying cycle that leaves you exhausted and off balance. The uncomfortable truth most people don't want to face is this: you can be right and still lose. You can win the argument, have the last word, dismantle someone's logic, and still feel depleted, confused, and disconnected afterward. Why? Because the energy you spent wasn't an investment in yourself. It was an emotional expense with zero return. Power doesn't come from reacting. It comes from choosing wisely what is worth your response. That's where discipline enters. Your emotions are currency. The very word emotion means energy in motion. Every reaction is a purchase. You're either investing that energy in aligning with your true self, or you're paying for fleeting validation that leaves you drained in the long run. Emotional discipline is not coldness. It's conservation. It's a refusal to let your nervous system be hijacked by people who haven't earned your effort or intimacy. It's walking away from meaningless conflicts that only fuel someone else's need for drama. It's staying silent when provoked, not because you have nothing to say, but because you know your words won't be heard. It's learning the difference between true dialogue and traps disguised as conversation. Some exchanges are voids that consume every ounce of your light without giving back. Here's the truth. Avoiding reaction doesn't mean suppressing your truth. It means refining how you express it. It means feeling everything deeply, but choosing selectively what you share. It means honoring your emotional world without turning every feeling into public currency. Not every part of you needs to be broadcasted. Some things are meant to be witnessed quietly by you, in stillness, without applause or confrontation. That is psychic sovereignty. The power to no longer seek validation from the outside because your inner world already knows its own truth. But this is not how the world is set up. We live in an attention economy, addicted to reaction. The more you react, the more you engage. The more you engage, the more you engage, the more your energy is harvested by algorithms, ideologies, and unhealed people searching for emotional targets. You have to break this cycle, become selective, strategic, and still reclaim your focus, audit your reactivity, and withhold your fire from places that only want to burn it. Remember, you are not here to be perpetually triggered. You are here to transform, to transmute your energy, to guard it as if your evolution depends upon it, because it does. There are few moments as defining as the split second after you've been triggered, when harsh words hit, a tone sharpens, a look, a gesture, or silence, all signaling danger. You can feel it, blood rushing, throat tightening, heat surging behind your face, jaw clenched before you can stop it. Then comes the story your mind tells. They don't instead respect me. They spur trying to humiliate me. I have to say something. I need to defend myself. That internal rush isn't weakness. It's history. It's memory encoded in your body. A younger you surfacing in milliseconds, believing that if you don't act, you will be diminished, erased, made small, so you react quickly, loudly, sharply, emotionally. But if you're willing to pause, resist the pull of the reflex, you begin to see something far more vital. The trigger you feel is not the real threat. The trigger is the teacher. It's not a sign of instability, but a guide pointing you toward growth and self-awareness. It's like a flare pointing directly at what still holds power over you. Not the person in front of you, not the immediate situation, but the unprocessed wound they just grazed. This is the discomfort most people run from, the unbearable recognition that the real enemy isn't outside. It's an unexamined vulnerability within. Carl Jung spoke often of this inner fragmentation. He believed that the path to full self-realization requires radical confrontation with the shadow. Your shadow is the hidden part of your psyche, buried deep beneath the persona, the social mask you wear. This shadow surfaces through triggers, not to shame you, but as signals. They tell you there's something inside you that's been abandoned, neglected, and urgently needs to be brought back home. But this awakening can only happen if you choose to stay. Not stay in the argument or conflict, but stay within yourself. That is true discipline, to remain conscious and present even while your nervous system screams to shut down, lash out, or run away. It means feeling everything, the pain, the shame, the anger, without becoming overwhelmed by the feeling. To notice the emotional surge without mistaking it for absolute truth. To recognize you are standing at the edge of your own inner territory and choose not to collapse beneath it. Mastery is not the absence of reaction. It is the ability to meet your reaction with enough awareness to discern what part of it is genuinely yours and what part is inherited, ancestral memories, conditioned responses, or automatic patterns. When someone insults you and your body prepares for battle, yet instead of fighting, you breathe, observe, and hold the charge without exploding, you have stepped out of the spell. You are no longer controlled by the moment. You are moving with it from a place of centeredness and choice, not compulsion. This is the crucial divide between reactivity and sovereignty. Reactivity comes from survival instinct. Sovereignty is self-possession. And yes, this is difficult. It means facing the very wounds you've spent your life avoiding: helplessness, abandonment, rejection, betrayal. The trigger will find those wounds, and if you let it, the trigger will rule you. But if you learn to sit with the shame, anger, and rejection long enough to see them clearly, you strip the trigger of its power. You stop being a servant to patterns formed in the past. Instead, you become the witness, the container, the presence holding the charge without becoming the explosion. In that moment, you reclaim something no external validation can give you: choice. The choice to speak or stay silent, to hold your center, or let it be hijacked, to act in alignment rather than in reaction. Feeling triggered is inevitable, but letting the trigger define your reality is optional. It's not about never being affected, it's about becoming aware enough to recognize when your old wounds are steering your life, and conscious enough to take back the wheel. This is the real work, not avoiding conflict, not pretending to be fully healed, but practicing presence in the exact moments when it's hardest to hold. You don't need to fight every battle that echoes your past trauma. You don't need to prove your worth to those determined to misunderstand you. You don't need to match the provocation's energy. Sometimes the most radical act is doing nothing. No defense, no performance, just stillness. Stillness that says, I know who I am, and this moment doesn't get to define me. True power is not loud or reactive. It is steady, measured, unshaken by noises that once unsettled you. This is when you realize the trigger no longer controls you. You do. This isn't avoidance, it's evolution. And if you want to measure how free you truly are, don't look at your calm moments. Look at who you become when you're provoked. The path to sovereignty isn't perfection. It's forged in fire, in every breath you take when you want to scream, in every silence chosen when you could dominate, in every ounce of inner stillness built when everything inside wants to shatter. This is how you meet yourself. This is how you reclaim your power. You might notice sometimes when people look at you, they don't see you at all. They see a version shaped not by your true presence or their curiosity, but by their projections, their unresolved stories, unmet needs, and hidden fears masquerading as expectations. If you've spent your life being agreeable, adaptable, or emotionally fluent, you may have become the perfect screen for their projections. Not because you asked to be that way, but because survival taught you to bend toward what others wanted long before you even knew what you needed. You learned early how to sense the room, to anticipate, absorb, and adjust. You became skilled at reading between the lines, staying ahead of disappointment, and earning closeness by being whatever they needed you to be. But here's the hard truth. It wasn't love. It was a performance of worth. Because when people interact with their projection of you, they aren't connecting with your true being. They're relating to your utility, to the image of you that confirms their worldview, to the version of you that doesn't challenge their fantasy. They cast you into archetypes. They see you as the helper, the strong one, the calm and reliable one, the person who doesn't require much. And as long as you play that part, the relationship seems to work. But the moment you shift, when you get quiet instead of comforting, say no instead of accommodating, the energy changes. You're no longer easy or convenient. You've broken the projection. In systems where your compliance was mistaken for character, your truth will be seen as betrayal, not because it's wrong, but because it upends the balance of control. It reveals the relationship wasn't truly mutual but conditional, dependent on your ability to stay inside the frame they drew. Jung taught that projection is an unconscious process. People cast parts of themselves they can't hold, their wounds, their idealizations, their shame onto others. They do it automatically, without realizing it. And if you're unaware, you'll mistake being idealized for being loved. But it sets not the same. Love is based in knowing. Projection is based in need. One liberates, the other demands your obedience. The danger of projection isn't just being misunderstood. It's psychic erosion, when your identity is reduced to a single dimension, when you become a symbol, a role, a function within someone else's emotional economy. And here sits where it becomes manipulation. You're praised for staying in the role, validated for self-sacrificing, rewarded for silence, admired for compliance. But the moment you reclaim your time, energy, or agency, those who adored you become cold, passive-aggressive, critical, even hostile. They withdraw affection to steer you back into place. They label you selfish, changed, or ungrateful, not because you did anything wrong, but because they lost control of the character you were cast to play. Many people, sensing this shift, fold. They shrink back into the script, because the loss of belonging, even false belonging, feels more terrifying than loss of self. But there comes a point, often after repeated exhaustion, when you realize maintaining the performance costs more than walking away from the stage. That's the moment the mask slips. The moment you step out of the projection and allow yourself to become unrecognizable to those who only loved the idea of you. Yes, some may leave, but something else happens too. The projection collapses, and with it, the manipulative dynamic dies. Manipulation depends on predictability and your silent or conditioned consent. It needs you to perform your part, even when it costs your peace. But the moment you stop performing, you become unpredictable, not volatile but sovereign. You're no longer readable through their past lens, no longer swaggable with guilt, no longer pliable under pressure. This new version of you, the one who doesn't automatically say yes, who doesn't trade boundaries for belonging, disorients those who never truly saw you. And that disorientation is sacred. It means you're no longer playing a part. You're becoming a whole person, a full, multidimensional, emotionally honest being who no longer contorts to fit in or remain digestible. This is not rebellion, it sets reclamation. You're not here to be interpreted, you're here to be witnessed. Those who can't or won't were never connecting to you, only to their projection. So let the roles fall away. Let the applause fade. Let the version of you that existed only for other people's comfort dissolve, and in its place, let something quieter, truer, and far more powerful emerge. The you who no longer participates in your own erasure. The you who no longer fears being misunderstood. The you who would rather be real than revered. The you who is free. Choosing silence with awareness is not retreat. It's a powerful reclamation. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Yet, he also recognized that not every conflict is worth entering, especially those designed to provoke your reactivity rather than nurture your growth. When someone tries to bait you with criticism, distortion, or performance, they're often not addressing the real you at all. They're speaking to the image they've projected onto you, a projection rooted in their unconscious expectations and needs. If you react without awareness, you confirm the very role they cast you in, tightening the trap. But silence breaks that spell. It collapses the repeating loop. Silence confronts manipulative dynamics, not with retaliation but with absence, an energetic void where reaction once lived. And that emptiness forces their projection to crumble under its own weight. This is why silence is so threatening to control seekers without your participation. Their narrative loses its co-author, their strategy has no target, and their projection no longer has an anchor. To stand in silence when your buttons are pushed is not spiritual bypassing. It is psychological mastery. It is individuation in action, the Jungian term for the lifelong process of becoming whole, requiring you to step out of imposed roles and resist reacting simply because the story expects it. Yes, your silence may be misunderstood. You might be called cold, aloof, or avoidant. Let them mislabel your clarity, that too is part of their pattern. You are not here to be reshaped by their discomfort. There's a unique strength in the ability to stay still long enough to see clearly. Lucid silence is not withdrawal or defeat. It is the silence of the awake, the silence of a mind no longer racing to defend, correct, or perform. It is the silence of someone who understands not every moment needs words. Some moments call for observation. In the space between trigger and response, there lies rare clarity, but only if you pause long enough to claim it. Speak too quickly, and you miss the subtle architecture of the moment. The flicker in their eyes, the word almost said, the contradiction between their words and deeds. More importantly, you miss your own habitual reactions. When you hold your silence, you begin to see the full picture, the game behind the gesture, the pattern beneath the apology, and the hidden manipulation disguised as concern. This is what Jung called the beginning of individuation, the capacity to separate your awareness from others' projections, to differentiate your authentic essence from conditioning, to shed the persona others constructed and start becoming the self you were born to uncover. Because constant speaking, especially when emotions run high, is often just repeating programmed responses from childhood reflexes, trauma scripts, or archetypes others taught you to perform. Silence interrupts that loop. It transforms you from participant to witness, and witnessing in its purest form is the beginning of liberation. To observe is to reclaim the energy spent trying to control narratives, never yours to manage. It is to step outside emotional transactions and decode them. To ask with clarity and calm, not how do I respond, but what is really happening here. There is always a deeper dynamic, hidden in plain sight, if you are quiet enough to see it. The moment you stop reacting, you notice how often others deflect blame onto you. How casual comments turn into emotional tests. How innocent questions mask control. Silence becomes your vantage point, a raised platform above the fog of performance and pain. This is not about superiority, it's about sovereignty. You no longer need to interrupt falsehood, you let it reveal itself. Because in your stillness, people expose their own strategies. They tell on themselves. They stretch their sentences too far. They reach for justification too quickly. But you, no longer entangled in the exhausting exchange, begin to truly see. And that seeing isn't just outward, it turns inward as well. In silence, you notice your own nervous tics, your urge to be liked, your fear of being misunderstood, and your tendency to over-explain. You realize how often your voice has been a tool to defend boundaries you could simply uphold by calm presence. Here lies the paradox of lucid silence. The less you say, the more clearly you are seen, first by yourself, then by others. Choosing observation over reaction reclaims your rhythm and frees you from emotional captivity, returning you to your own center. From that center, you realize you don't have to win the conversation, you just need to stop performing in it. Withdraw the energy holding the narrative in place. Lucid silence says more with stillness than 1,000 rebuttals. When speaking from reflex, urgency dilutes truth, but seeing before speaking lends words precision, weight, and direction. This begins psychic economy, emotional discipline, subtle, irreversible power, not to control others, but to never again be pulled out of yourself by undeserving attention. Clarity comes from silence and is indistinguishable from strength. Yet speaking your truth isn't always empowering, especially when words fall on ears unwilling to listen. We often think sharing leads to understanding, but giving truth to the wrong people can leave you more misunderstood and alone. Every time you share needs or boundaries, you offer more than information. You offer a piece of yourself at emotional and mental cost. Ask yourself if you are investing your voice where it matters or wasting it. Jung warned of the danger of sharing with those who only see you through projections. They hear through their stories and assumptions, not your real self. When minds are made up, even clear words don't reach. Explaining yourself to those who twist meaning becomes damage control, not communication. You owe no one a breakdown of your decisions or to justify your peace to those thriving on your confusion. Be selective with your truth. Protect your energy, know when to speak, and when to hold clarity in silence. Not every conversation is safe, not every listener capable, and not every moment meant for disclosure. This is emotional maturity, discerning when truth is asked out of love versus extracted out of control. Notice how often you over-explain to keep peace, soften boundaries to be heard, and feel drained after sharing with those who don't truly see you. Shift by speaking less where disrespected, speaking deeply where you are. Let silence filter what needn't be said. Trust those who truly receive. You don't require performance to understand. Stop giving your voice to those who haven't earned it. You become wiser, speaking as one who knows their words matter. Knowing boundaries isn't holding them. Awareness isn't changing patterns. Without action, growth is delayed. You can analyze endlessly while nothing changes. It's easy to stay stuck in your head. Jung said true transformation begins when awareness meets responsibility, when insight shapes living. It's not enough to know people-pleasing is fear. You must feel that fear and still say no. It's not enough to say your peace matters. You have to guard it fiercely. You have to let the phone ring. You have to stop explaining your decisions to people who never truly listen. Discipline is the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. At first, discipline will feel uncomfortable, maybe even wrong, because your nervous system is still wired for old patterns. But every time you pause, choose presence over performance, silence over apology, you're rewiring more than your behavior. You are reclaiming your self-respect. This isn't stat about perfection. It's stat about practice. Your truth doesn't need more discussion. It needs more embodiment. So ask yourself honestly, are you performing what feels safe or living what feels real? Because reflection without action is avoidance, and clarity without change is just another cage. Start small, hold the boundary, let the silence speak, let the phone ring. That is when healing stops being a concept and becomes a conscious choice. Being alone can feel scary, especially if you've tied your worth to roles or how much space you take up in others' lives. Society teaches us solitude means something's wrong, that if we're not constantly connected, we've failed. But what if solitude isn't punishment, but the beginning of something essential? There comes a point when you feel worn out by your own performance. You say yes when you want to say no. You show up to things that don't nourish you. You smile, nod, and go along even when it costs your peace. Maybe you've done this so long you forgot what it feels like to be yourself when no one is watching. This is where sacred isolation starts, not as cutting off others or building walls, but as intentional space where you pull back from noise to hear yourself again. At first, the quiet may feel heavy, unfamiliar, even lonely, but stay with it, because beneath that discomfort lies something rare, your real self. Carl Jung described this with the idea of the persona, masks we wear to get through life, to fit in and to function, but wear the mask too long, and you forget what lies beneath. To find yourself again, you must step away from the crowd, not forever, but enough to see which parts of you were shaped by approval, fear, or habit. Sacred isolation is that pause, when you stop performing who others need you to be, and start remembering who you are when no one needs anything from you. You begin enjoying your own company. You choose rest over obligation. You say no without guilt. You sit in silence and realize you're not lonely. You're peaceful. From that peace, something powerful happens. You rebuild your life around your truth, not others' expectations. You stop needing constant validation or chasing closeness that leaves you empty. You start choosing what feels honest, even if small or quiet. Sacred isolation doesn't disconnect you, it makes you whole. Sometimes pulling away isn't rejection, it's remembering, it's reclaiming, it's coming home to yourself. And once you do, you don't seek yourself in others. You carry yourself everywhere. Letting go can feel like grief, but it's not loss, it's release. Not goodbye to something beautiful, but escape from what was breaking you slowly. When distancing from someone, guilt often rises. You wonder if you're being unfair, too sensitive, or cold. But ask honestly, are you grieving the person or detoxing from the chaos they brought? Not every connection nourishes. Some drain, disorient, and addict. You feel responsible for their moods, trying to balance on a tightrope. You leave conversations more confused than clear. Intensity is no proof of depth. Emotional chaos is instability, masked as intimacy. Walking away from it isn't coldness, it's clarity. You might not notice the weight gone until one day, after distance grows, you feel peace. Not dramatic peace, but quiet peace. You stop overthinking, rehearsing, and fixing what was never yours to carry. That sets when truth lands. What you feared losing was what held you back. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Unchecked emotional chaos becomes normal. But space reveals the cycle, not real connection. Emotional detachment doesn't mean lack of care. It means stopping the cling to pain. It's not building walls but boundaries, protecting energy, clarity, growth. At first, it might feel an ending. But truly, what ends is the version of you believing pain equals connection. What comes next is strength. When you stop needing people who confuse your nervous system, you trust yourself again. Your inner world quiets. Your mind steadies, your heart lightens. Sometimes loss is just clarity filling the space once occupied by chaos. Let it. A quiet power returns, not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. It shows in how you walk, speak, and hold space for yourself without permission. This is rebirth, not the self built to survive or perform for acceptance, but the real self beneath. You don't find this self by adding more, but by subtracting, pulling energy from drains, withdrawing attention from false roles, letting dead things die. Rebirth begins when you stop settling, not only in relationships or work, but in how you treat yourself. You see how much of life was shaped by fear, disguised as too much or not enough, by being misunderstood or left behind. When you stop feeding fear, you grow something new, a self that doesn't chase, perform, or explain. Jung named this process individuation, unfolding your truest form, not who others told you to be, but who shines when noise fades. This reborn self doesn't need validation to act, doesn't shrink in rooms that can't hold its truth. It knows solitude isn't punishment, it's preparation. Boundaries aren't barriers, they're birth canals for new identity. Yes, grief will come, for the roles played, for years shrinking to keep peace. But when release is complete, what rises is sacred, a whole you rooted in wholeness, not approval. You begin creating instead of coping, attracting instead of begging, becoming instead of explaining. Those who resonate with your frequency find you because you no longer hide your signal. Rebirth isn't always a breakthrough. Sometimes it's stillness, shedding, saying, "I don't want this anymore," trusting something better fills the space. And it will. When you stop giving energy to drains, you reclaim power. You redirect it toward healing, clarity, a life that fits. This is your true self, not better, just real. Now that you've stopped settling, you're ready to live as them.